The second wave of feminism, key legislation and court cases. The first wave of feminism ended in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted women suffrage. Between 1920 and the beginning of the second wave of feminism, what it meant to be a woman in America went through many changes, from the flapper to Rosie the Riveter to the all-American housewife. In the late 1940s through the 1950s, there was a change in the way women were viewed in America. It was once again expected that women sacrifice their aspirations to be full-time homemakers. This suppression brought about the second wave of feminism. The second wave of feminism roughly lasted from the 1960s through the early 1970s, also referred to as the women's movement. This time period was characterized by radical feminism with acts such as protesting the Miss America pageant in 1968. The second wave of feminism was also characterized by theoretical discussion which talked about the origins of oppression, the nature of gender, and the role of family. The second wave of feminism was not only about protest and demonstration, but also about very important legislation that helped women across the United States. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy established the President's Commission on the Status of Women and appointed former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt as chair. The main goal of the commission was the responsibility for developing recommendations for overcoming discriminations in government and private employment on the basis of sex, and for developing recommendations for services which will enable women to continue their role as wives and mothers while making a maximum contribution to the world around them. Even though the PCSW was formed due to the urgence for the Equal Rights Amendment, which was originally introduced in 1923, the last report of the Commission, the Peterson's Report, did not address the Equal Rights Amendment, but instead focused on the need for child care and discrimination in the workforce. The Commission was successful, then it helped establish the Equal Pay Act. The Equal Pay Act was an amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Equal Pay Act prohibited employers from paying unequal wages based on gender. If men and women are doing substantially equal work, they deserve and must be paid the same wages. This was a very important step towards equality. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law. The Civil Rights Act was a landmark piece of legislation in that it outlawed a number of discriminatory acts that provided rights and protection for all people in the United States. The major victory for women in the Civil Rights Act was Title VII, which prohibited the discrimination of employees by employers based on race, sex, religion, or nation of origin. The victory for women was the inclusion of the word sex. Not originally included, it was introduced to the House by Republican Howard Smith. Most people believe Smith added the inclusion of women as a way to hold the act up from passing. Despite his efforts, the act passed. Title VII also helped form the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which was charged with interpreting and enforcing Title VII. Not only was there important legislation passed during the second wave of feminism, there are also landmark court cases that help define and protect the rights of women. The 1965 Supreme Court case of Griswold v. Connecticut struck down the law that prohibited married couples from being able to obtain birth control. The law was struck down on the basis that it violated the right to marital privacy. Estella Griswold, the executive director of Planned Parenthood, filed the suit against the state. This case helped pave the way for later and more prominent case, Roe v. Wade. Thanks to Reed v. Reed, a probate case in the state of Idaho, the Supreme Court declared that sex discrimination was a violation of the 14th Amendment. A separated but still married couple, Sally and Cecile Reed, both filed to be the executive of their deceased son's estate. Cecile was given preference over Sally due to an Idaho state statute that gave preference to male relatives. Sally appealed and helped women across the country gain equality. Perhaps the most renowned case from the second wave of feminism, the 1973 Supreme Court case Roe v. Wade, which voted that the criminalization of abortion was a violation of the rights protected in the 14th Amendment. This case finally granted women control over their own bodies. Without women fighting, protesting, and pushing for these pieces of legislation and victories in the courtroom, change would not have happened. Thanks to the efforts of many brave women, we can now enjoy the freedoms and rights we have today. With continued effort, maybe one day we will have full equality that the women that participated in the second wave of feminism were pushing for.